go to the moon in this decade and do the other things. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Good evening, good morning or good afternoon. I'm the Casual Spaceman and welcome to my channel once again. Thank you very much for coming. Good to see so many of you watching. I was expecting so many to come over. How did you enjoy the shows tonight? Oh, well, by the way, let's have a voice check. If you can hear me, let me know in the chat, please. That'd be useful. Thank you very much. 16 watching already. Fantastic. So, can you hear me in the chat all right? It all sound good? Does it all sound good? Hello. Is anybody there? Can anyone hear me? Can anyone hear me? I know there's a delay. We hear you, we hear you, we hear loud and clear, loud and clear, loud and clear. Cool. Okay, so signal 5 then, basically. Okay, so who have we got in the chat? Let's have a look. You do usual thing. Forever Learning, he was here earlier on. Oh, he's a regular. Global Chris, as always. Global Mum, thank you for coming. Global Mum, Global Mum, Global Mum, or Global Chris. Monochromatic Light Source, good to see you, buddy. Thank you very much for coming. Colon, good to see you again. BM Furball, wow, fantastic. Thanks for coming, BM. Appreciate it. Pete Berube, colon again, blah, blah, who are we? Yeah, pretty much most of the usual suspects, but good to see BM Furball here. Thank you very much. Mr. Victory, good to see you again. Thank you very much. And, oh, somebody by the name of Nina Belton. Don't know who she is. She's going to kill me after this stream because that's my girlfriend. Great, okay. You can hear you. Thank you very much. Brilliant. Okie. Well, tonight's live stream, in case you haven't wondered, is shortly there's going to be an announcement by Elon Musk. Those of you who don't know who he is the founder of SpaceX. And over these last months, they've been developing and building the test Starship prototype. And it's full-scale size test vehicle. And it is freaking huge. I mean, it is massive. Okay, it's 9 meters in diameter. The bit that they've built is only the bit that's going to go up into space and do all the orbity stuff and all that kind of stuff. Okay, that's the only bit so far they've actually going to build and they're going to test. Okay, but I mean, that's massive as it is, but that's only little less than half of what the total rocket is going to actually be once they actually put it on, start testing it on top of what they call the super heavy booster. It's going to be 25 feet or so taller than the biggest rockets that have been built, and that's the Saturn V that took the Apollo spacecraft to the moon from 1969 to 1972. So that's the benefit of those that don't know about these things. I know a lot of you there do know about this sort of stuff, but I'm just letting you know anyway. So tonight he's doing a bit of an announcement. There's been some changes to the design, so it's his chance to sort of show it off a little bit. I suspect probably what they're going to do is they're going to be testing it very soon. The first test, to say, is going to be a 20-kilometer test. In other words, it's going to fly. Well, I suppose you might say it's a suborbital flight, but it's not quite up into space. 20 kilometers. And then it's going to land back down up on its end again, ready to use again. Okay, so the whole spacecraft is going to be reusable, the first of its kind. And it's also using engines of the first of its kind. Those types of engines that they have never flown. And it uses a particular type of fuel that's never been used either as well. So they are going to be making history. And I cannot freaking wait for that thing to fly. I was excited about the Starhopper, you know, the flying water tank. I was really freaking excited about that. But this one, I'll tell you what, the SpaceX fans community is absolutely wetting their knickers over this, and I've got to be honest, So am I. Oh, I know it's really geeky, I know, but I honestly, I cannot wait for this thing to fly. So, who else have we got joining us? Still here. Also, usual suspects. Oh, did I miss some Jen's? Oh, Jen's little corner's here. Thank you, Jen. Thanks for coming. Thank you very much. Good to see you. I never expected actually quite so many because I know Logical Troglodyte's going to be doing his 6 subscribers soon. So yeah, just go on over there, guys, because his channel needs to be supported in that. So when his stream, please go on, go over to his stream seriously, because this is kind of space geeky sort of stuff. So if you're not into it, then please, I won't be offended if you go on to see Logical Troglodyte, because if this wasn't on, I'd be doing exactly the same thing. If I wasn't sleeping, no, I would have actually stayed up for that actually. So yeah, I'm just going to have a little check around to see whether SpaceX are ready yet. I don't think they are, not quite yet. No. So anyway, so how did everybody did everybody watch the Shills tonight? What did you think? Have somebody with Unirock stature on the show, I think is awesome. 7 PST. I think it's something like that, Global Mom. Let me just have a look. I'm not sure. So it's T. Hang on a second. BST. It's 2 a.m., isn't it? Let's have a look. That's PST. That's Pacific time, isn't it? Oh no, it's Pacific Standard Time. Yeah. Well, Pacific Standard Time, PST is 5 o'clock. Eastern, it is 9 o'clock. And Central, oops, I can't even type Central. I can't type. Central Time is 8 o'clock. Yeah. So 5 o'clock PST Pacific, 2100 or 9 o'clock Eastern, and 2 o'clock Central. But it's 2 o'clock in the morning for us poor Brits at the moment. So I'm sure you feel very sorry for us. Dick Dawson's in the chat as well. Good to see you, Dick. Great show tonight, buddy. Seriously, honestly, really, really great show. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Pacific will be 9 and 10. Am I getting my time zones wrong then? I'm a bit confused. Pacific Standard Time, I thought that was. Oh, I don't know. I'm really confused. I know about Central and I know about Eastern. I use that a lot to when I'm portraying times and things like that. So. Oh, sorry. You were talking about the time for Logical Troglodyte's type show. Yeah, I don't honestly know. I can't think of the time. Is it? He's probably in about another hour or so, is he, or another half an hour? Yeah, I mean, guys, you go over to Logical Troglodyte, because like I said, unless you're a space fan or a SpaceX fan, then don't hang around. Just go on over there, please. It's all good. It's all good. Yeah. Yeah, but good to see Dick on the chat for the moment, at least. Hopefully, SpaceX will be starting shortly. What I'm planning on doing, if it doesn't go on for too late, I'm gonna maybe do like a bit of a carry on with the live stream, and I'm gonna have Discord open, and you can come and join, and we can talk about anything you like. But I suspect most people will be watching. Logical is at 10 Eastern. All right, okay. Yeah, Global Mom. Okay, so that's in about an hour's time. Yeah, 2 o'clock in the UK, monochromatic. That's exactly it. Yeah, in an hour. Yeah, that's okay. Well, you'll be able to see an hour of this at least anyway. So yeah, please go over to Logical after that. Or it would be daft if you don't. Yeah, but I really enjoyed the Shills tonight. Dick, I mean, I don't know if you're listening at the moment, but I saw that there was 114 likes, I think it was, and at one point I think there was 172 watching, I think, on the Shills tonight as well, which I don't know whether that's the most I've seen or not. I have no idea. Are we on the Elon time? Yeah, Travis, you're right there. There's Elon's time and there's everybody else's time. People will discover that quite a lot. We're actually on Elon's time, Travis, because originally it was supposed to be an hour earlier. So it's an hour later. So yeah, we're actually on Elon's time today, most definitely. Well, I was supposed to actually have the chat on the screen, but it doesn't seem to want to be playing ball. It's not. Doesn't seem to be working. Let's have a look. Why is it not working? The chat box. Why are you not up? Why are you not working? It doesn't matter. I've got, this is a new one as well. I've got a little widget that shows how many viewers I've got on the screen. Look, there we go, 19 viewing. That's fantastic. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much for coming to the channel. Appreciate it. Jen Morgan, tricks. What's tricks? Who's tricks? Who's doing tricks? We've got two Jens in the chat, I've just realised. Jen Morgan in Jen's little corner. Yeah, if you haven't seen Jen's little corner, yeah, type it into the YouTube search and go over and have a look at her channel. Subscribe. She does some great stuff. I pop over every now and again to watch her videos, but there's so many in our community that I like to watch, but I never get around to it. But I do. She does some great little videos and things like that. So yeah, pop over. She's a great little creator, so I appreciate it. Why am I saying little? I have no idea. Don't know. Yeah, so for those of you who have joined, this is a big announcement by Elon Musk. He's going to show off the SpaceX Starship, huge freaking rocket, spacecraft that is going to be used to go to the moon and land on Mars. And this is the test prototype, Mark 1. Mark 2 is being built in Florida somewhere. I forget exactly where Jens rule the world. That's right. Yeah, Mark 2 is being built in Florida. And there was a hint, actually. Elon Musk did actually say that possibly Mark 3 might be twice the diameter, 18 meters. I mean, holy crap. I mean, that would be 8 meters wider than the Saturn V rocket. Absolutely freaking huge. Can you imagine the size of that? We can have a little drink of my tea. Oh, right, let's find out. Let's see what SpaceX are doing. Oh, fantastic. Aren't SpaceX great? They've delayed it by 15 minutes. Ugh. Bastards. Who was saying we're on Elon's time? Who was saying that? Who said we're on Elon's time? I can't remember who was it who said that. I'll go back up again. Travis Harrison. Are we on Elon time? Yes, we are most definitely on Elon time. Because he's put it back again. I'm going to write a very stern email to Elon Musk and tell him off. What do you think? Do you think he'll reply? Well, I'll put it this way. I've actually, because I know he's never going to reply to me, but I've actually sent him probably over the last 3 months. I've probably sent him about 20 new emails inviting him to an interview on my channel. I've sent, I don't know how many texts and all the rest of it asking for an interview on my channel. Do you think one of these days he might reply? I think not. But can you imagine if I had Elon Musk on? I'll go up from 1K to I think about 1 million, I think, overnight. Man, that would be awesome. That would be awesome. Right, okay. Yeah, hopefully SpaceX will be starting in another 12 minutes. Right, I'll tell you what, I mean, I'll give you a bit of a rundown of what's been happening with SpaceX. Right. They have been developing a system, a reusable rocket system or reusable spacecraft that's going to be the biggest that's ever been built. And it will be completely reusable. It's been called different things over the last couple of years during its development. BFR being one of them, standing for Big Falcon Rocket, not standing for anything else, I can't promise you. It was called ITS at one point, Interplanetary Transport System or something on those lines. Designs have actually changed over the time, and it keeps changing. But we finally got to a point where they have now built the test prototype, the orbital test prototype. And what I mean by that is it's actually going to be going into orbit at some point. The first test that they're going to do will be flying up to 20 kilometers. It will then hover, and it will then come back down and land on the landing pad, either on the same, well, it probably won't be the same pad that it took off from, but it'll be a pad quite close to where it took off from to begin with. So that will be the first test. And I was just saying earlier on, when you see it, you get to understand the size of it. But as I said also earlier on, this is for the benefit of those of you that joined. When it's put on top of the booster stage, because that's only one stage, that's only the Starship stage, the orbital stage, it will be standing 25 feet taller than the biggest rocket ever built, and that is the Saturn V rocket that was launched, the Apollo spacecraft to the moon and back. Not to the moon and back, sorry. It launched the Apollo 11 spacecraft, all the Apollo spacecraft. And this thing is huge, absolutely ginormous. And this test variant they've got at the moment has some very special engines on it called the Raptor engine. And the type of that, I won't go into the details of it because I don't fully understand it, how this engine works, but it's very, very unique engine. It's never actually flown before. And they've actually got 5 of this on this particular test vehicle. Okay, and it is really, really, really powerful rocket, hugely powerful. And they tested one of the Raptor engines on the Starbar hopper, as they called it, a few weeks ago, which was that great big flying water tower, is the best way to call it. So yeah, so that's basically what is happening. So tonight, Elon Musk wants to show it all off, and what he's actually got there, you'll see, is the prototype that they've built down in Boca Chica in Texas. And next to it is standing the Falcon 1. The Falcon 1 was SpaceX's first orbital space rocket. And it's tiny in comparison. So they've gone through this kind of evolution. They went from Falcon 1, which was not a reusable rocket, and they had a manifest of lots of different launches, and they said, nope, stuff this, we're going to develop the Falcon 9, which was the first reusable commercial rocket. And everybody thought they were crazy, absolutely nuts. What are you doing? What are they doing? Everybody thought Elon Musk was crazy. So they developed it, built it, tested it, it worked, and they have been using the Falcon 9 to launch satellites, I don't know how many times, over the last year and a half or so, no, a couple of years, and it's almost like a regular occurrence now. And then they've also developed the Falcon Heavy, which is essentially 3 Falcon 9 strapped together. Sorry, 1 Falcon 9 with 2 Falcon 9 rockets strapped together as boosters, and that's what they call a heavy lift, or a heavy lift vehicle. So you kind of see this evolution they've gone through, and everybody thinks they're mad because over the last couple of months they've stopped all their launches, their manifest of launching satellites, to concentrate on developing this Starship system. So people still saying they're absolutely mad, but so far he's been right and it's worked. Awesome stuff. And the BFR, yeah, that was the first design Jen Milk and the BFR. Yeah, the BFR is now transformed into the Starship. Why are they? Who knows why it's been changed? I mean, it's all for all kinds of different reasons, really, and stuff like that. So let's have a look. Let's have a look at some of the comments. Let's have a look. Elon is redesigning the clock to metric time. Oh, well, Jen, I think it should be starting again soon in about 5 minutes. So not to worry. Thank you very much for the offer. It's probably not really worth it because I don't want to talk during this presentation because I think it will take it away from it. So that's fine. But thank you very much. Really appreciate the offer. Thank you. Elon is forever learning. Elon's reset his start time to 13 minutes from now. Yeah. Well, at the moment it's still 2:15, so that's 6 minutes, starting 6 minutes. So he hasn't changed it again yet. Beast of rocket for sure. Global Chris says absolutely. Why do I get large Delta 5? Is only why not go large? Delta 5 was only a number. I don't really know what you mean by that monochromatic light source. Elon is in the chat. Yeah, I wish Elon Musk was in the chat. Christ. You come to keep an eye on me, see I'm not doing anything wrong or saying anything stupid. Oh, that'd be nice if he was. That'd be awesome. Oh, I tell you what, I would if I had the money to pay Elon Musk to have a chat on my show. Oh, blimey. Oh, yes, please. For the amount of subscribers I'll get out of that. Christ, can you think of that? Fuck me. Oh, I promised I wouldn't swear on my show. I wonder if Elon Musk reuses tissues too. Well, Jen, he's really into recycling. As you know, Elon Musk is also the designer of Tesla, which is the one of the most successful electric cars on the market at the moment, because they developed battery system that works and lasts a lot longer and goes really fast. So yeah, it's the first of its kind. Right. Okay. Well, I think things are starting to kick off with SpaceX. So, just bear with me for a second. I'm just going to set a few things up, and then I will hand over. Can't wait. You must all think I'm nuts. I cannot wait to see this. I really can't. I mean, I've seen clips of it and stuff like that, but I just can't wait to see what he's got to say and what else he's got to announce as well. So yeah, I'm really excited. That's why I thought I was going to stay out and watch this anyway. So that's what I thought I'd stay up and share it with you guys. And I hope you enjoy. Right, okay, without further ado, I'm now going to hand over to SpaceX, and I hope you enjoy, and let me know if you can hear it okay once it all starts up. Enjoy.
of Earth having been quite a deep gravity well and having quite a thick atmosphere, this is a tough but not impossible thing. But it is the most fundamental thing. So with SpaceX, we started out 17 years ago, and the first rocket we designed was the Falcon 1, which was that guy right there.
3,
No.
2,
There.
1. Liftoff.
Stage separation.
Your separation confirmed.
So Falcon 1, we thought, yeah. Good old Falcon 1. We started off, we were very naive. In fact, the reason, I should say, the reason Mach 10 to 12, and it hits the atmosphere like it's a concrete wall, and boom. So you actually have to orient the rocket carefully. You have to have aerodynamic surfaces. You have to do an entry burn to slow it down. You've got to guide it through the atmosphere, and then do a propulsive landing. This took us many attempts. And we actually did like a video of a blooper reel of all the times we failed, which was a lot. I think it might have taken us like 14 attempts or something before we finally successfully landed the rocket. So, if we go on to the next slide, we can take a look at. This is Grasshopper. That's actually Falcon 9. It's hard to tell the scale, but that's a Falcon 9 size booster with one engine. And big legs with giant shock absorbers, because we didn't know what the heck we were doing. Now, amazingly, Grasshopper had zero crashes. Grasshopper is still alive. The cows are confused. Yeah. So they have Falcon 1. What you saw there was a Falcon 9 size vehicle, and then what's really kind of hard to grasp at a visceral level is that this giant ship will do the same thing that Grasshopper did. So this thing is going to take off, fly to 65,000 feet, about 20 kilometers, and come back and land in about 1 to 2 months. So that giant thing is really going to be pretty epic to see that thing take off and come back. And then hopefully, yeah. Yeah, it's wild. So now this is a quite radical. I'll talk about it later in the presentation. This is a quite a new approach to controlling a rocket. Much more akin to a skydiver than a plane. But I'll talk about that later. So going from Falcon 1 to Falcon 9 to Falcon Heavy, which we launched, actually the first launch of Falcon Heavy was only February of last year. So it's only been about a year and a half since the first Falcon Heavy launch, when we did 2 side-by-side booster landings. And I always like this video that was done by my friend Jonah.
It's a god-awful small affair to the girl with the mousy hair, but her mummy is yelling no, and her daddy has told her to go, but her friend is nowhere to be seen. Now she walks through her sunken dream to the seat with the clearest view, and she's hooked to the silver screen. But the film is a sad thing for she's lived it 10 times or more. She could spit in the eyes of fools if they ask her to focus on sailors fighting in the dance hall. Oh man, look at those cavemen go. It's the freakiest show. Take a look at the low man beating up the wrong guy. Oh man, wonder if you'll ever know who's in the best-selling show. Is there life on Mars?
Yeah, I never thought that would happen, actually. Glad that it did. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, like the you know, some people wonder, like, why do we have the Roadster with the astronaut, you know, Starman? And it actually just came from a discussion of my friend Jonas. I was at in his kitchen, and I was like, you know, normally when they do a rocket launch, they launch a rocket concrete, but that doesn't sound very inspiring. So, what do you think the most sort of fun thing is that we could launch? And he was like, well, why don't you just launch a Tesla? And that's a great idea. And then another friend of mine, she said, why don't you put a tiny Tesla on the dashboard? So we put a tiny Tesla on the dashboard with a tiny Starman in the tiny Tesla. This is just to confuse the aliens in the future. They were like, what the heck is this? So, yeah, you know, just wanted something to capture the imagination, get people excited about space. So let's see, Starship. So this is, well, you can really see it right there, obviously. There's the picture, more rendering. It's about 50 meters, so, you know, sort of 165 feet or so. Yeah, so the ship, I think, actually, I noticed we have an error in our ship dry mass here. My apologies. I wish it was 85 tons. The ship dry mass would be approximately 120 tons. The initial Mark 1 prototype is closer to 200 tons, and in series production, I think it'll probably be about 120 tons. If we get really lucky, it might get down to 110. 99 would be super epic. but in terms of its usefulness, it'll be able to do about 150 tons with full reusability to orbit and back. So this is a very big number for full reusability. The very initial versions we're confident will do over 100 tons, but I think there's a clear path to 150 tons. And the cost of a fully reusable system is basically the cost of the propellant, which is mostly oxygen. This is 3.5 tons of oxygen for every 1 ton of fuel. So one of the advantages of this architecture over the Falcon architecture is that we actually use more oxygen per unit of fuel rather than less. So Merlin or the Falcon architecture is about 2.5 tons of oxygen for every 1 ton of fuel. This is 3.5 tons of oxygen for every 1 ton of fuel. So when this ascends, it's really mostly liquid oxygen. Because when you get to vacuum, there's no air, basically. So, yeah. The next slide. So, yeah. So earlier I was talking about how Starship enters and how it's controlled. It's quite different from anything else. It's really falling, and so we're doing a controlled fall. So with a rocket, you're actually trying to brake, as opposed to you're trying to create drag instead of lift. It's really the opposite of an aircraft. You want the most amount of drag that you can produce. And you want some lift, especially when you're in the upper atmosphere, mostly so that you can control the maximum heating rate. You want enough lift to keep yourself high in the low density portion of the atmosphere, so you can burn off velocity, and then so you want, but then basically it goes like if this is the Earth, it goes at about a 60 degree. My hand is the rocket. It's going at about 60 degrees. So when in orbit, you're actually going at around 25 times the speed of sound, horizontal to the ground. So this is a very important concept that is counterintuitive to our normal daily life. Being in orbit, being in zero G, is not about altitude. It's about velocity. How fast are you going horizontally? This doesn't. So when something's in orbit, it's zooming around the Earth so fast that the outward radial acceleration is equal to the inward acceleration of gravity, and then you have zero gravity. This is why you actually have zero gravity. The space station, people often think the space station is stationary, but it's actually going around the world at 25 times the speed of sound, or about 17,000 miles an hour. It always looks stationary in the pictures. And since there's no air, you don't have to have an aerodynamic structure. So you can be a totally crazy structure that doesn't look like it should be able to go 25 times the speed of sound, but it does. And you can only feel acceleration. You can't feel velocity. So people sometimes wonder, what does it feel like to go 25 times the speed of sound? Actually, it feels like nothing. Only accelerating to there feels like something. So Starship is coming in. If this platform is the Earth, it's coming in at hypersonic velocity like this, sort of at around a 60-degree angle. So it comes like this, and then starts falling, and then just falls like a skydiver. And it's just controlling itself, and then it turns and lands, like that. So that's incredibly elaborate explanation. And then you can get a sense for it. This is much better. There you go. See? Same thing. Look better with the hand? Okay. But it'll look totally nuts to see that thing land. Yeah. That'd be crazy. Wow. Cool. So let's see. Talking about the Raptor engine. So the ship will have a total of 6 engines, 3 of the sea level variety of Raptor, and those are actually on the rocket right now. So we have the 3 sea level. In fact, that's a picture of just inside that skirt. That's what it looks like. So we've got the 3 sea level Raptor engines, and they gimbal, which means that the whole engine moves. So the way a rocket steers is by moving the entire engine. So whereas an aircraft engine is static, and you move by moving like the control surfaces, like the ailerons and rudder and elevator and flaps, the rocket, when the engines are powered, you move the entire engine to steer it. But so the Starship will have 3 sea level engines that move up to about 15 degrees angle, and 3 vacuum engines that are optimized for efficiency that will not move. So they will be just fixed in place, and that allows us to have the biggest bell nozzle for the vacuum Raptor engines. Aspirationally, the target is a 380-second ISP for the vacuum engine. This is a very, in sort of space geek terms, this is like really a great number. And even for the steel engines to get over a 350-second ISP is also really great. So, actually, yeah, sorry. I'm looking at the slide view and you're not. So that's what I meant by it looks like that on the inside. Sorry, go back one slide. That's the inside of the Starship right now. So that's what it looks like in the base. All right, and then heat shield. So we've gone through various iterations of heat shield. There's a lot of ways to skin the cat here. Ultimately, we decided to have heat shield hexagonal tiles, ceramic tiles that are basically like a tiny glass vermicelli at a microstructure level. So very, very light, but very crack resistant, essentially glass tiles. And they're, because Starship is a steel construction, like at first it feels like, oh, it's steel. Does that mean it's heavy? No, actually it's the lightest construction. Steel is the best thing, I think the best thing about, best design decision on this whole thing is a 301 stainless steel. Because at cryogenic temperatures, a 301 stainless actually has about the same effective strength as an advanced composite or aluminum lithium. Unlike most steels, which get brittle at low temperature, 301 stainless gets much stronger. And if it's in the extra hot condition, meaning it's cold rolled to extra hot condition, it also gets way stronger. So its strength to weight ratio at cryogenic temperatures is equivalent or even perhaps slightly better than advanced composites or aluminum lithium. So this is not well appreciated, because if you just look at the materials manual and say, like, what is the strength of stainless steel, it looks much weaker than it is. You say, what is the strength at cryogenic temperature? Oh, much stronger, or at very low temperature, almost twice as strong. That's when it becomes better than carbon fiber or aluminum lithium. And there's another benefit. It also has a high melting temperature. So for a reusable ship, you're coming in like a meteor. You want something that does not melt at a low temperature. You want something that melts at a high temperature. And this is where steel is extremely good as well. So it's, steel has a melting temperature around sort of 1,500 degrees centigrade, whereas aluminum, maybe 300 or 400 degrees. And same thing for carbon fiber, and that's really pushing it. So this is having that much higher melting temperature means that you don't need any shielding on the leeward side of the ship when it comes in for entry. And the shielding you need on the windward side, the hot side, is massively reduced, because the thickness of the tile is actually, for a reusable system, is dependent on what back shell temperature, like how hot does the back of the tile that interfaces with the airframe get. And because the steel can take a much higher temperature, your heat shield, even on the windward side, is much lighter. The net effect is that a 301 stainless steel rocket is actually the lightest possible reusable architecture. Then it comes to cost. The carbon fiber we were using was $130 a ton. The steel is $2,500 a ton. Sorry. Yeah, 25. The $130,000 a ton versus $2,500 a ton. That makes much more sense. So it's $130,000 a ton for the carbon fiber, and $2,500 a ton for the steel. So the steel is about 2% of the cost of the carbon fiber. So it's a good thing we changed from carbon fiber to steel, by far. It's very easy to weld stainless steel. The evidence being that we welded it outdoors without a factory. So, great skills by the team, but with carbon fiber, this is impossible. With aluminum lithium, also impossible. But steel is is easy to weld, and it is resilient to the elements. And also, actually, as talking to Austin earlier, he was saying, like, on Mars, you can like cut that up, you can weld it, you can modify it, no problem. Yeah, that's a good point. You're out there on the moon or Mars, you want something that you can modify, that you can cut up and use for other things. That's like for sure a great thing. So anyway, steel, obviously I'm in love with steel. It's, it's time I had to say it, So great, so let's see, going on to the booster. So the booster is designed to take up to 37 Raptor engines. I'm not sure if we'll go that high, but you can really, have 31. I think like the minimum number you'd want is, maybe around 24. But the booster is designed to be able to take multiple engines out. So you can actually add or subtract engines as you'd like. You basically just need a lot of force pushing up. Over time, I think you probably want around a 7,500 ton force rocket, which is about twice the thrust of a Saturn V, a little more than twice the thrust, and on a roughly 5,000 ton gross liftoff mass. So for roughly 1.5 thrust to weight. For a reusable rocket, you actually want a high thrust to weight rather than with an expendable rocket where you want a low thrust to weight, because any thrust to weight below 1 is not useful. Like if you have less thrust than your weight, you don't move. So you actually want a high thrust to weight for a reusable rocket. This is a very important design optimization change. So that's why I think more engines is probably good, and getting up to around 7,500 tons over time, and a 1.5 thrust to weight ratio, or more. So, we think we're probably going to adjust the grid fin design to be kind of like more of like a diamond shape. It looks cooler. It works better too. And then the rear fins are actually just legs. So they're not needed for stabilization or guidance. They're essentially there for legs. All right, so let's go into some of the development testing. This is a Raptor firing. All right, and then obviously we had a Raptor fire on the Starhopper. Yeah. and it's kind of hard to see to appreciate scale, but it's the same diameter as Starship, and obviously it's just right over there. So it's kind of hard to tell if it's the size of a trash can or how big it is. But the body diameter is about 9 meters or 30 feet, not including the leg span. So this gives you a sense of size. So the little pixels there, little pixels are a human. And then there's the Hopper next to it, the Millennium Falcon for comparison. Then Starship, which is what you see before you. And then that's what will look like with the full stack, which is almost 2.5 times as tall as this vehicle. This simulation will give you a sense of the scale of things. It slightly reminds me of the scene from Spaceballs. Orbital refueling. Orbital refueling is extremely important for getting to Mars and getting to the moon. Or establishing a city, establish a city or on the moon or Mars. This is a vital step. To Mars. Exactly. A rapidly reusable orbital launcher or rocket is required for alliteration. for getting a breakthrough in cost of access to space, that you don't throw the rockets away every flight. But another key step is refilling on orbit, so that the Starship can get to orbit with, let's say, 150 tons of payload for the Moon or Mars or beyond, and then it can get tankered to fill up its propellant tanks, and so that it can depart from low Earth orbit with 1,200 tons of propellant. This is a very big thing, so that your delta velocity is enough to transport literally 150 tons to the surface of the Moon or Mars. With full reusability and orbital refilling, which is essentially, the orbital refilling is actually a simplified version of what SpaceX does in docking with the space station. So it's actually harder to dock with the space station than it is to do orbital refilling. But in practicing in docking with the space station, SpaceX has also learned how to rendezvous and dock in orbit in a complex environment. So this is one of the other critical pieces of the puzzle needed to establish a base on the Moon and Mars, a city ultimately. And yeah, so those are the critical ingredients. So we think it would be very exciting to have a base on the Moon, even if it's just a science base. That, we have, for example, we have a base at Antarctica. Many countries have bases in Antarctica for science research, and this would be an incredible area of research. So whether or not people want to live on the Moon, there's definitely a lot of science to be done. And I think it's close as well. So that would be quite exciting to do. And then, of course, we can go to other places in the solar system, like Saturn. But the critical thing that we need to focus on, I think, is the fastest path to a self-sustaining city on Mars. This is the fundamental thing. As far as we know, we are the only consciousness or the only life that's out there. There might be other life, but we've seen no signs of it. People often ask me, what do you know about the aliens and that? I'm like, man, I tell you, I'm pretty sure I'd know. If there were aliens. I have not seen any sign of aliens. So they're like, well, is the military hiding aliens in Area 51 or something? That's a popular meme. Well, let me tell you, the fastest way to increase defense funding would be to bring out, like, hey, we found an alien. People are like, more money for defense, definitely. This is guaranteed. That would be like on display in 2 seconds. So, the reality is, as far as we know, this is the only place, at least in this part of the galaxy or in the Milky Way, where there is consciousness. And it's taken a long time for us to get to this point. According to the geological records, Earth's been around for about 4.5 billion years, although it was mostly molten magma for about 500 million years. But still, several billion years with at least bacterial life and multicellular life for several 100 million years. But here's the interesting part. The sun is gradually getting hotter and bigger. And over time, even in the absence of global warming, man-made stuff, the sun will expand and it will overheat the Earth. My guess is probably, this is on human time scales, this is a long time, but there's only several 100 million years left. That's all we got. Okay, several 100 million years. But thought of from an evolutionary standpoint, basically, if it took an extra 10% longer for conscious life to evolve on Earth, it wouldn't evolve at all, because it would have been incinerated by the sun. So what I'm saying is that it appears that consciousness is a very rare and precious thing, and we should take whatever steps we can to preserve the light of consciousness. And the window has been open. Only now, after 4.5 billion years, is that window open. That's a long time to wait, and it might not stay open for long. I'm pretty optimistic by nature, but there's some chance that window will not be open for long. And I think we should become a multi-planet civilization while that window is open. And if we do, I think the probable outcome for Earth is even better, because then Mars could help Earth one day. And so I think we should really do our very best to become a multi-planet species and to extend consciousness beyond Earth. And we should do it now. Thank you. Thank you. Oh yeah. Any questions? So, yeah.
Hi, Elon. Irene Klotz with Aviation Week. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you for the overview. Can you tell us a little bit more details about the flight test program for this and the Mark II?
Actually, can we just turn the music off? I can't quite hear because there's music playing. Oh, excellent. No, sorry. Could you probably just say that again?
Yes, thank you. Can you talk a little bit more details about the flight test program for both this Mark I and the Mark II vehicle in Florida, and what the progression is to get to orbital flight and then a test flight or a commercial mission with the full vehicle?
Sure.
Thanks.
So, yep, with any development into uncharted territory, it is difficult to predict these things with precision. But I do think things are going to move very fast. So our plan is in basically 1 to 2 months to do the 20-kilometer or 65-foot flight with Starship Mark I. Our next flight after that might actually just be all the way to orbit with a booster and the ship. I'm giving you just literally stream of consciousness here. Most likely we would not fly to orbit with Mark I, but we would fly to orbit with Mark III, which will be built after Mark I right here. In fact, we'll start building it in about a month. So, yeah. And actually, so sorry to say this mid-question, but I did want to make sure to thank Yusaku Miyazawa for his great support. Yeah, he's awesome. Yusak 2020, that's his handle. That's a great handle. Anyway, he's a super cool dude, and he's like, you know, putting a lot of serious resources to helping out Starship. So I want to thank him very much for that. Anyway, so yeah, just to frame things, we are going to be building ships and boosters at both Boca and the Cape as fast as we can. And each successive, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to be really nutty to see a bunch of these things. I mean, not just one, but a whole stack of them. And we're improving both the design and the manufacturing method exponentially. So, for example, with the current way that we build or the way that Mark I and Mark II cylindrical sections were built was in with basically plates. So a series of plates to create each cylinder section. With Mark III and beyond, we will literally take the coil of steel from the mill, unspool it, change the curvature to a 9-meter diameter, and do a single seam weld. And it would also be thinner, which makes it lighter and cheaper. So the rate at which we will be building ships is going to be quite crazy by space standards. I think we'll probably have Mark II built within a couple of months or less, and Mark III maybe 3 months, that type of thing. Mark IV, 4 months, maybe 5 months. And we would seek to go to orbit with probably Mark IV or Mark V. So we would, I mean, this is going to sound totally nuts, but I think we want to try to reach orbit in less than 6 months. I mean, provided the rate of design improvement and manufacturing improvement continues to be exponential, I think that is, you know, accurate to within a few months. Yeah.
Hi, Elon. My name is Steve Clark. I'm with the Brownsville Herald. Back in September 2014 at the groundbreaking, you said that the first crewed interplanetary mission could possibly leave
Yes.
Can you hear me? Could possibly leave from Boca Chica. Do you think that's still the case?
Yes, it is. I think definitely possible that the first crewed mission on Starship could leave from Boca. We actually are internally competing the Cape and Boca. So I think both places will, to the best of my knowledge, both places will launch crewed missions. So I think it is extremely likely that we will launch crewed missions from Boca, and there is at least a 50% chance that it is the first mission. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Hey Elon, Tim Dodd, the Everyday Astronaut.
Hey,
how are you?
How's it going? Good.
Good.
You have great questions online.
Thanks. You have great answers.
Yeah, welcome.
So that belly flop to tail down maneuver, I
Yeah.
mean, that's something to see. Is that first one, this one right here, 20 kilometers, is it going to come in that hot and do that flip that fast right here, or is it going to be out on the drone ship? Like, that's
No,
crazy.
it's basically right where Hopper took off.
Yeah.
That's basically where it's going to take off. Very close to where it's just right over there. So yeah, that maneuver that you saw, it will execute now. When we get to, I think maybe Mark 3, certainly Mark 4, I think probably that will be a good time to transition to hot gas thrusters from cold gas thrusters. So using essentially compressed nitrogen gas as the cold gas thruster is a pretty low ISP, sort of 60, 70 if you're very lucky, but very closer to 60. With methox thruster, you can get, without really even trying hard, 300 ISP. Even if you just foam cool the walls, without even regen cooling. If you regen cool it, 350, no problem, 360 even. So you're talking about something that's then 5 or 6 times the mass efficiency of the nitrogen thrusters that are on Mach 1. And if you have thrusters of that efficiency, then we don't need to use the Raptors to correct the horizontal velocity. Because right now it's actually, when the Raptors fire, the Raptors kick it over, but they actually accelerate the vehicle in the wrong direction. Then they have to overcorrect and then come back. Whereas if you have strong enough thrusters, you can just, using the onboard maneuvering thrusters without lighting the main engines, you can just go kick it hard, light the engine, land. That'd be, that's better. Yeah.
And then are those pressure fed then? Those
Yeah. Those would be just pressure fed, high pressure gas methox, and so you'd have a high pressure CH4 bottle, high pressure O2 bottle, and then the great thing is like those they don't care what attitude you're at. You can be at any attitude, any G's, any attitude, it'll still fire. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Elon. I'm Tim Fernholz from Quartz. Thanks so much for taking the time.
You're welcome.
2 questions, if I may. One, just technical, following up on the presentation. To do useful stuff in orbit, you're going to need the booster as well as the Starship, right?
Yes. Starship cannot get to Earth orbit without the booster. But anywhere except Earth, pretty much. Well, not counting Venus. But like the Mars or the Moon, the ship, provided you have a propellant plant on Mars or Moon, the ship can easily get a single stage from the surface of the Moon all the way to the surface of Earth without a booster. So that shows you how deep, like Earth has a deep gravity well and a thick atmosphere. But definitely cannot, if we really went crazy light, you could probably do single stage to orbit non-reusable with the ship. But that would be pointless.
Elon, I just wanted to ask, NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine had a tweet last night about this presentation, concerned, I guess, about enthusiasm for SpaceX's various programs. I'm just curious if you have any comment or response to that.
Yeah, for sure, from a SpaceX resource standpoint, our resources are overwhelmingly on Falcon and Dragon. That is to be clear. It was really quite a small percentage of SpaceX that did Starship, you know, less than 5% of the company, basically. The really hard part that requires a lot of resources is optimizing something past the initial prototype phase and bringing it into volume production. So to be clear, like the vast majority of our resources are on Dragon and Falcon, especially Crew Dragon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Elon. Chris Gebhardt with NASA Spaceflight. How do you guys envision keeping the methane and oxygen inside the tanks from boiling off in any significant quantity during a multi-month interplanetary trip to Mars? And on a more Earth-grounded question, what's your contamination mitigation strategy since these things are being built outside in the elements and not in a factory?
Well, these are pretty far in the distance questions. These questions are relevant, but in the future years. Keeping the landing propellant cold on the way to Mars is a lot easier than it may seem, because you can essentially vacuum, just like you'd keep cryogenic propellant stored on Earth for long periods of time. You vacuum jacket it. We would essentially have header tanks that are bigger than these header tanks and vent them to vacuum. So you would just basically have a tank inside a tank with multi-layer insulation, and this way you can keep things cryogenic for months, no problem. It requires very little energy to, you don't even really need to worry about boil-off. You could apply some energy to cryo-cool it, but you don't really need to, you'd have a tiny amount of boil-off. You know, in vacuum, things are kind of weird. They're not like on Earth because you have no convective cooling, really, in zero G. So you actually have, the sun side of your rocket is very hot, and the not sun side of your rocket is at 3 degrees Kelvin. So it's super cold. So you just like keep your cold stuff on the cold side and the hot stuff on the hot side, and this is not a problem to manage. You know, for the long-term stuff for sort of what's called contamination of Mars, you know, I think this concern, first of all, we'll do everything we can to mitigate it, obviously. But at the end of the day, if you're going to send people to Mars, that's a pretty big contaminant, you know. But I really don't think that some Earth-based bacterium is going to be able to migrate much through Mars. The thing that makes Mars very difficult is that it is both cold and has high ultraviolet. So if it was either cold or ultraviolet, you could evolve to deal with it. But the cold slows down the metabolic processes, and then the ultraviolet shreds the DNA. So you're cold and shredded. This is very difficult for things to exist on the surface of Mars, and that's why we have not found any traces of life on the surface of Mars to date. If there is any life, it'll be very deep underground, and I think very resilient. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. It's also worth noting that over time there have been meteors. There have been chunks of Earth that have been chipped off by meteors, and chunks of Mars that have been chipped off from Mars. And Earth and Mars have actually exchanged material many times over the last several hundred million years.
Hey, Elon, it's Chris Davenport from the Washington Post.
Hey.
Curious about your vision for this area. I mean, when you drive by and you see this, it's surreal.
This is surreal.
Yeah, but I know your vision isn't maybe like a government launch site, like a Cape Canaveral. But what does this look like a private, operational, commercial spaceport?
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, I mean, it will definitely get fancier than it currently is, you know, because the reason it's not fancier is just because it would have taken too long to build the buildings. So since it was going to take so long to build the buildings, we just built it outside. Yeah, this is like my new thing is management by rhyming. If the schedule's long, it's wrong, and if it's tight, it's right. Yeah. It works. SR-71, you know, fastest plane in history ever. You know, it's also the coolest plane ever. You know, it had no anti-missile defenses except one: accelerate. Yeah. Zero. They tried to shoot it down many times. 0 successes.
give us a quick sense of what you think this area will look like in, say, 10 years when you are flying crews?
Oh, I think it'll be like a lot more buildings and a lot more stuff. Like way more stuff than is currently here. As you can tell, the wind is really quite vigorous. Like one of the things that I think will be quite important to have locally is propellant production. So trucking massive, thousands of tons of liquid oxygen to the site doesn't make a ton of sense. We should really produce the liquid oxygen here. And by the way, we have gaseous oxygen in the atmosphere, so we basically just need electricity. I forgot to mention, one of the things over time is, like for the propellant production on Mars will be completely renewable because we will use solar panels, pull the CO2 out of the atmosphere. Mars has a primarily CO2 atmosphere. Get the H2O, the water, from the ice. Mars has a massive amount of ice. You combine H2O and CO2, and you get CH4 and O2. There's a very long understood process of run it over ruthenium catalyst. This is a Sabatier process to create CH4 and O2 out of CO2 and H2O. And that same system that we developed for Mars will long-term be used on Earth. So long-term, this is like, long-term we will produce the propellant for the rockets using solar power. And pull the CO2 from Earth's atmosphere, use water, combine that to create CH4 and O2 on Earth. And so the long-term outcome will be quite sustainable and renewable for Earth and Mars.
Jeff Faust of Space News. You spent a lot of time this summer working with the FAA getting approval to do a single Starhopper flight to 150 meters. Now you're talking about flying a much bigger vehicle to much higher altitudes and ultimately flying to orbit. Where are you in the FAA in terms of getting approval for that? And will those flight opportunities be able to coexist with, say, the local residents around here?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the FAA Administrator for Space has been excellent to work with. Very forward-leaning. Really, I would just like to say thanks to the FAA for their support, actually. I mean, really, there's, minimal delays related to regulatory activity, and they've been really very reasonable, and so, the support's very much appreciated. So, I think the FAA asks, good questions and wants to make sure things are safe, as do we. And so we're going to make sure that the risk to the public is extremely, vanishingly small, almost nothing, basically. So, it's the same sort of thing that we've had that we deal with on Falcon 9 and Dragon, and has gone very well, for the 17 years that SpaceX has been around. So I feel pretty optimistic about things. I don't see any fundamental obstacles. We are working with the residents of Boca Chica Village because we think over time it's going to be quite disruptive to living in Boca Chica Village because it'll end up needing to get cleared for safety a lot of times. So I'd say probably not very. There would be just not very comforting to the Boca Chica Village. I think the actual danger to Boca Chica Village is low, but it's not tiny. So therefore, we want super tiny risk. So, probably over time, better to buy out the villages, and we've made an offer to that effect. Yeah.
Thank you, Elon. It's Tarek Malik from Space.com. And I was curious, with the design update here, if 100-person crew size for base flights is still kind of the target now, and how the life support...
Sorry, could you talk about louder? The wind is like howling in my ear, unfortunately.
Sure. Yes, with the design update here, I'm curious if the 100-person crew size target is still the main target for base crew flights, and how the life support system for that is being developed for both the initial test flights and then maybe for Mr. Miyazawa's flight too in upcoming years. Thank you.
Yeah, I think It's really, I think you could still do 100 people. Like the pressurized volume on Starship is around 1,000 cubic meters. So if you had 100 people, you'd have 10 cubic meters per person, which is, and, especially in like a 0G situation, that's actually quite a lot of room. Unlike a 1G situation, you only get to use one surface, really, live on one surface in a 1G situation, but in a 0G situation, you can live on 6 surfaces. You can like all 6 sides of a cube. So things are way roomier than they may seem. And by the way, 1,000 cubic meters, I think, is close to what the space station pressurized volume is. So Starship is like basically like launching space station pressurized volume on every flight. This is quite a lot. We can make it bigger if as needed. Yeah.
Hi, Elon. Stephen Clark from Spaceflight Now. Thanks for taking our questions. We see the Starship prototype here, Mark 1. You talked a little bit about how you're going to build the super heavy vehicle. Can you update us a little bit more detail about how that development is going, where exactly it'll be built, and when we might see it on a test stand or on a pad?
Sure. Yeah. Good question. So the priority is to build at least 2 Starships at each site, at Boca and the Cape, and then start building the booster. So we'll complete Mach 1 through 4 before doing Mach 1 of the booster, and then we'll do Mach 1 and Mach 2 of the boosters at the Cape and Boca. The main constraint on launching the booster is engines, because obviously the booster has a lot of engines. So spooling up the Raptor production rate is extremely important to, vital, obviously, essential to completing the booster. Doing the tanks and the legs and, say, the grid fins, that is not a constraint. Like that we can get done fast. But we need, I think we'd want to have at least probably 24 engines, but I think really at least 31 engines to launch. So you add that up, you've got a lot of engines there. We need for 4 Starships, we need these just have 3. Mach 1 and 2 just have three Raptor engines. Mach 3 and 4 will have 6. So you add them. This is like a lot of engines, basically, including development engines. From now through orbit, we probably need 100 Raptor engines. And our production rate right now is maybe one every sort of 8 to 10 days. But it should be one every couple of days in a few months. And then our target is to get to a Raptor engine every day by Q1 next year, or sooner.
And if I may, when will we see people flying on this vehicle into space?
Well, I think we could potentially see people fly next year. If we get to orbit in about 6 months, then we have it's designed to be a reusable rocket, so a reusable booster, reusable ship, so we can do many flights to prove out the reliability very quickly. So whereas with an expendable vehicle, you have to build, if you want to do 10 flights, let's say, to prove out the viability of an expendable vehicle, you need to build and destroy 10 vehicles. Whereas we can do 10 flights within basically 10 days. So when I say rapid reusability, I mean, you could fly it. You could fly the booster 20 times a day. You fly the ship 3 or 4 times a day. That's what I mean by reusability. And the only reason the ship it takes more time than that, it's more time than the booster, is that you need a couple of you need 3 or 4 orbits to synchronize for the ship so that it is I don't want to get into those complicated thing of orbital dynamics and the rotation of the Earth relative to satellite. But as anyone who's knows space, the track of a satellite, unless it's an equatorial satellite, is a sinusoidal track on the Earth. Unless it's equatorial or sun synchronous. So. Launching sort of due east, you have to kind of wait for the orbits to the ground path to sync up with the launch site, and that's the only reason it really takes maybe 6 hours or something like that to sync up and land back at Boca or the Cape. One of the really interesting things to contemplate is the total mass to orbit capability of a large reusable system where you have a significant fleet in operation. If you've got something like Starship where you've got maybe 150 tons capable to orbit, and the ship can fly, is capable of, say, theoretically flying 4 times a day, but they call it like 75% uptime, so theoretical 3 times a day, 365 days a year. So that's like about 1,000 flights a year for the ship. The booster can do a lot more than that. This is obviously max theoretical. And you've got 150 tons. That's 150,000 tons to orbit per year per ship. And if you've got, say, 10 ships, you would have 1.5 million tons to orbit per year. 20 ships, you got 3 million tons orbit a year. I think the total rest of world capacity, if you take all rockets on Earth, including Falcon, the total capacity to orbit, I think, is around 200 to 300 tons currently. Total Earth capacity to orbit is about 200 to 300 tons if all rockets launched at max rate. So we're talking about something that is, with a fleet of Starships, 1,000 times more than all Earth capacity combined. All other rockets combined would be 0.1%, including ours. But you kind of need that if you're going to build a city on Mars. So it's got to be done. It's got to be done.
Elon, hi, it's Bill Harwood with CBS News. I just wanted to follow up on an earlier question about life support systems, because that's not trivial, and obviously you're building a very sophisticated piece of hardware. Are you thinking about closed-loop regenerative systems? Are you thinking about developing these in-house, or are you looking at designs that already exist on space station, for example? And what are you shooting for initially? I know you're not going to be launching 100 people on your first flight, but what sort of a crew complement can we expect on those initial test flights, and how sophisticated does that life support system need to be? Thanks.
Yeah, I think for sure you'd want to have a regenerative life support system. So that just means you're recycling everything. That's for sure important if you're on a several months journey to Mars and then on the surface for 18 months. Regenerative is a kind of a necessity. So I don't think it's actually super hard to do that. Relative to the spacecraft itself, the life support system is pretty straightforward. Yeah, you just got to it's pretty straightforward. You got to take out the water vapor and the CO2, convert that back to O2. It's not super hard. The early flights of Starship would not have any people on board. It would just be in automatic mode. It would only be later flights that would have people on board. So I think even the first flights to Mars, we would send at least a couple of ships, have them just land automatically before sending people. Yeah.
Take about 2 more questions.
Hi, Elon. Eric Berger with Ars Technica. I would just argue the X-15 was the coolest plane of all time. And my question, I guess, is, we're not really used to seeing hardware built in less than a year. Can you talk about the timeline for this vehicle? Like, when you started fabricating it and how you went so quickly on it. Thank you.
Actually, I'm not sure. I think like up until October last year, we were pursuing a completely different design. So it was really, I switched the design to steel, I think, approximately maybe October last year. And then it's like, okay, what's the fastest we can build a steel, ship in Texas? And then I think we built it in about 4 months or something, maybe 5 months. And then the ship, I think I'm not sure exactly when we started building it, but maybe about 4 months ago that we started building the ship, maybe 5. So it's been 4 or 5 months since we started building the ship from nothing, I think. Yeah, something like that.
And how did you go so fast?
Well, I have this mantra called, if the schedule's long, it's wrong. If it's tight, it's right. Yeah. And just basically just go recursive improvement on schedule. And say with feedback loop, did this make it go faster? Okay, if it didn't, we're going to need to fix it. If the design takes a long time to build, it's the wrong design. This is the fundamental thing. Over and over, it's like the tendency is to complicate things. And I have another thing, which is like the best part is no part. The best process is no process. It weighs nothing, costs nothing, can't go wrong. So, as obvious as that sounds, the best part is no part. Like the thing I'm most impressed with when I have the design meetings at SpaceX is, what did you undesign? Undesigning is the best thing. Just delete it. That's the best thing. Yeah.
Hey Elon, Robin here from supercluster.com. My question is about potential fund synergy between SpaceX and your other projects. 1, is there a concept for a Tesla Mars rover? 2, are you going to be launching? Yeah, is there a concept already?
Well, actually, the Teslas will work on Mars. If you can you can just drive them pretty much, because electric cars don't need oxygen; they don't need air. So you can just drive them around, no problem.
Are you going to bring a boring machine to the moon or Mars?
I think that would be a good idea.
Me too.
Yeah, because you could just make as much room as you want underground, and you protect it from radiation and everything, and you can probably use the materials for building. And you need to mine ice and dirt anyway, so why not? Totally.
Thanks, Elon. And I don't believe you about the aliens.
I hope I'm wrong. I hope they're well, if they are here, I hope they're nice. They haven't killed us yet, so they must be not that bad. All right, any other questions?
Just one. Okay. Hi, Elon. I'm Martin Avignon from the SpaceX subreddit. We've crowdsourced a few questions. It sounds like I only have time for one, but oh well. I was wondering, could you elaborate on the number of engines that will be used for the boost back and entry burns on Starship, and what the dry landing weight of the Super Heavy will be?
Oh yeah, so Starship wouldn't really. There's the 20-kilometer thing, which is mostly. It's going to have 3 engines, but you only really need either 2 of them to work at any given point in time. But the ship, when it's in orbital operation, will only need a tiny bit of impulse to deorbit. You need a very tiny, less than 5% of the mass of the vehicle is needed to deorbit. So you just really puff one of the engines, and the main thing is trying to get the control. How do you shut off the thrust really precisely, so that you don't over or undershoot your target. And then for the booster has 7 engines that gimbal, and then the rest, whether it's a total of 31 or 37, are fixed. The fixed engines would not be used for boost back. So only the center 7 would be used for boost back. And then I really want to try to avoid an entry burn, if at all possible, That would, because that would, you have to have a high, the system has to be capable of a very high Q entry in order to avoid an entry burn. But I think we might be able to make the booster buff enough that it, it doesn't need an entry burn, hopefully. So then it just needs a landing burn. Thank you. Yeah. All right, great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming. Hope you enjoyed it. All right.
Well, there we are. What did everybody think of that? You can just let me know whether you can hear me. Sorry, I was just getting a few things shut down there. If you can hear me in the chat. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh my god, it's nearly 4 o'clock. It's early or late, whichever way you want to look at it. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear me, Major Tom? Whichever way you want to look at it. We hear you. Forever learning. Thank you very much. Thank you. Except for, well, I'm not Major Tom, and neither are you. So, what did you think of that? Any comments or anything that, any questions or anything that you sort of found interesting that you'd like to comment on? Just put it in the chat. I made a few notes and a few key things that sort of that came out of that. As I mentioned before, we're going to see in October or November would be the 20-kilometer flight for Mark 1, which is the variant you can see behind Elon Musk. So yeah, you said within the next couple of months, so October and November. But again, this is all Elon Musk time. It's quite a lot different from most people's time. The Mark II said he thinks should be built within the next 2 or 3 months. That'll also, again, you probably get again these atmospheric test flights. In other words, these two variants probably wouldn't actually get past the Kármán line. Then Mark III would probably be built within 4 or 5 months, and as you heard Elon Musk say, that one, pretty much as I said earlier on as well, will be produced as a single seamed weld core. Okay, so you won't get the stainless steel sort of panels that we sort of see like patched up and all the rest of it. It looks a bit sort of rough and ready. So as I was saying earlier on, it's going to look a lot more sort of professionally manufactured, if you like. I think I want a better of a word. So yeah, it will be stainless steel, but it will be a seamless or a single seam. So it will be single seamed weld core, as you mentioned before. So that will probably be, I suspect, a suborbital variant. It will probably reach a suborbital flight. It will get past the Kármán line. It will go into space, and then it will probably come down shortly after that. And then he mentioned as well the Mark IV, which they said probably within 5 or 6 months, probably will be the full orbital version. So we're going to see the that spacecraft to a full orbit and a full test. Again, so from Mark III onwards, there will be a single-seamed welded core. And he said later on, he also mentioned that the super heavy boosters booster building will begin shortly after that. So the first booster part will be built shortly after that. And he did mention that. Hang on a second. They were talking about the amount of Raptors engines that are going to be on the boosters. And there's a lot of Raptor engines. So you've got the booster stage. You've also got the Starship orbital stage. So that's a lot of Raptors and a lot of tests. So I think he mentioned that they were looking at they'll end up producing maybe one Raptor a day by the end of Q2 or Q3, I think next year, which is for rocket engines is a massive, massive achievement if they can actually pull that off. I mean, that is a huge amount of engines to be producing. One a day is fantastic. I'd be really interested to see whether they will actually centralize that or whether it will be in being built in different areas. I mean, he did say that they're hoping to actually have all these Starship launches from Boca Chica. So it'll be interesting to see exactly where they're going to be producing all these engines at such a rate. It would have to be pretty massive facility and a pretty massive operation, and it would need to be on a production line basis to make it more efficient. And I would imagine if they're going to keep building Starships as well, is that I should imagine they're going to have to come up with a certain amount of automated process in that, almost like building cars, particularly when they do start getting to Mars. They're going to have to build a lot of Starships and a lot of boosters, so that production will have to increase significantly. You know, you could, years down the line, you could be looking at producing 3, 4, 5 a day, and they probably might have to do that. So you would imagine they would have to automate it in some way, I should imagine, because engines are not easy things to build. They're really, really not, and they need to be very, very precise. And of course, we've got technology of 3D printing now and all the rest of it as well. So I should imagine that will probably be used to its fullest. It'll be 3D printed as much as they possibly can. And I think probably the Bell already is, I suspect, but I can't be very, very sure of that. So who knows, the Bell being the funnel part of the engine. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops along. A few other things he said as well. There'll be very likely crewed flights from Boca Chica, Texas. Now, I don't know if you've actually seen in the news, but it's quite interesting, is that you have nearby is Boca Chica Village, and the residents really, it's going to sound cruel, the residents are kind of in the way. It's not safe for them. So a few weeks ago, SpaceX sent out some letters to the residents. I think there's about, off the top of my head, I think there's about 20 houses there or so. What SpaceX have done is they've offered them to buy their houses for 3 times the value. That's the offer that they're giving them at the moment. And I think that's a time-limited offer, and they're saying it's not negotiable. What they could do after that, if they don't take up the offer of selling the house to them, SpaceX, for 3 times the value, I understand there's a piece of law within the United States, and particularly within Texas, where they could actually go through the courts and really enforce the issue, because they're seen as a producer of transport and also a producer for the local economy. So they could actually, within within federal law, they can actually force the issue to get residents to sell their property at the going rates or a fair value plus some compensation. So kind of the residents are kind of going to be in a bit of a quandary. They could take up the offer. That could be option number 1. Option number 2, they could try to negotiate. I mean, everything's always negotiable. We don't really know, but again, we don't know how they react to it. Or they could hold out for a better offer. But it sounds to me that they're not going to get a better offer. So if they hang on, they could risk then going through the courts. They'll force the issue, and they'll only get the actual going value rate plus some compensation. So it won't be anywhere near as much as what they're offering at the moment. I mean, people are saying, I think it's a very, very fair offer. 3 times the value, fantastic. Personally, I probably would take it. But then again, I don't live in Boca Chica. There's probably some people that have lived there all their lives, and I can understand fully, if that's the case, that they wouldn't want to leave an area that they've lived there for many, many years and come to know and love the place. So, you know, I'm not a resident there, and neither are you or us. So, you know, kind of a difficult one, I would imagine, for some people to take. I mean, if you haven't been living there, I should imagine probably those that haven't been living there very long would snap up the offer. I certainly would. But like I said, that's me. I mean, let me know what you think. I mean, if you are a Boca Chica resident, would you take up the offer, or would you try and negotiate a better price? Excuse me. I'll just take a drink. Or would you perhaps hold out and see if you might get a better offer? Don't know. Let me know in the chat. Let me know what you think, what you probably might do. It'd be interesting. Or if you're watching the recording of this, let me know in the comments below this video. It'd be interesting to see what you think about that. Christopher Chase, he said Q1, did he? Oh, right, okay. No, I'll take your word for it. I wasn't 100% sure what he said. I was going to rewind later on and check. But no, I'll take your word for it, Christopher. It's Q1. Fantastic. Well, if they're going to produce 1 Raptor engine a day by Q1 next year, that'd be awesome. Really, really good. So thanks for correcting me, Christopher. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Why question 1.2 million foot? Yeah, well, Christopher, I like I said, I inclined to agree with you. But like I said, I don't live in Boca Chica, Texas. There could be people there that have lived there all their lives, and they would value a place that they know and love over perhaps monetary value. So who really knows? And people might react in a way that, well, you're not going to force me out of the house. So it could quite get difficult. It could, the legal side of it could go on for quite some time, which could delay things because they've been having difficulties with the FAA, with the Starhopper, to do it at a safe time, etc. And that had a lot to do with it, and that was just 1 Raptor engine. So you can imagine what damage could potentially cause to the local houses with just for the tests with 3 Raptor engines. Huge, the shock waves and all the rest of it. So, Brian, yeah, again, like I said, yeah, I'll take up the offer as well, Brian. So, but like I said, it's who knows. I can feel for people at the same time that lives there as well. So, but there we go. Okay, excuse me. Let's have a look. Something else I find surprising that you said as well, that they're actually only putting, at the moment, there's less than 5% of the company resources being put into Starship. And they're still putting quite a lot of resources into Falcon 9 with their launch manifest, I'm sure. And also Falcon Heavy, and also the with Crew Dragon 2, or Dragon 2, which is the crewed variant of that's going to be used to go backwards and forwards to the ISS. As you know, that's been slightly delayed because during a test of the Raptor engines, not the Raptor engines, beg your pardon, of the Draco engines some months back, and that was after the first uncrewed flight of Dragon 2, it exploded. It went kaboom. What do they call it? An unexpected rapid disassembly. In other words, it blew up, which wasn't good. So it's been delayed. So they've worked with NASA quite closely with that. They seem to be putting things right. And earlier on, I saw that the astronauts that were going to be on the crewed flight were doing some abort tests from the pad not so long ago. So that kind of gives me the impression that they're getting quite close to finalizing Dragon 2. They've been doing a lot more parachute tests as well. As far as I know, that seems to be going okay. So, yeah, we could be seeing that being finished soon. So, yeah, I can understand they're working quite closely with NASA with that. So, they're probably putting a lot of effort into that as well. So, and I think that would probably be very, very, very lucrative for SpaceX as well, I'm sure. And another thing that Elon said was that we could be seeing crewed flights on Starship next year. But who knows? Again, Elon time. There was a good question as well about how they're going to prevent boil off of cryo fuels with long journeys to Mars. And Elon, I wouldn't say he waved it off, but he didn't seem particularly crude. And what he said was they're going to have header tanks with multiple layers, and it'll be vented off into space to prevent boil off. And as he said, on the sun side, it's very, very hot, the spacecraft on. Excuse me. And on the cold side, it's very, very cold. So you keep all your cold stuff on the cold side and all the hot stuff on the hot side. So sounds like a simple explanation. I'm not a scientist. I don't know how that works exactly. So I can't really go into some full details. But it's a question that I've heard being asked before. So whether that's a reasonable explanation for people that know more about fuels and boil off and all the rest of it as well, it would be really great to hear from you as well. So let me know, either let me know in the chat or in the comments if you're watching this as a recording. So yeah, just a few. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. A few points that I sort of picked out from that. So yeah, and I'm glad. I was beginning to think whether we're going to have a Q&A session, so I'm glad they did, because you can gain quite a lot more information from it. So as you see in the presentation before the Q&A, Starship is going to is not going to fly when it comes into land. It's going to fall like a skydiver, just a controlled falling, and then essentially, and the momentum that it uses, then it sort of flips it, uses the engines to gimbal, and then flips it upright, and then obviously slows down to come into land, which is really, really interesting. Let me just read a few comments on the chat. Let's have a look. Excuse me. Oh, I can't stop coughing. Declan's gone. If you're still here, Declan, thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it. Let's have a look. Heat Shield, if it comes to that, it would only look really bad at SpaceX, so they wouldn't have their best minds to work on a solution that wouldn't crush the company's image. Yeah, Heat Shield's making a point that about if it goes through the courts and they have to force the issue to get people to sell their land. Yeah, it could look bad for SpaceX Heat Shield, and I think they're doing the best to actually avoid that. Probably why they're offering 3 times the value of the property. And I don't think it's an unreasonable offer. I think it's a pretty reasonable offer. But like I said, I don't live there. Let's have a look. Forever Learning says, if the current real estate is relatively low, thrice that might not be enough to buy a new patch and a rebuild. Yeah, I haven't looked at what the values are there, Forever Learning, to be honest with you. But I suspect, quite possibly, because of where SpaceX have put themselves, quite possibly the real estate is quite high. But I mean, it's not a viable property at the moment, is it? Because SpaceX want it. So, excuse me. Let's have a look. With all the pressure from NASA to deliver it in the news the last 24 hours, Elon pretty much had to say that. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, Christopher. What did he have to say about what? Yeah, it was a valve leak. Yeah, it was a type of valve, wasn't it? With the when they were testing the abort engines, the Draco engines. Yeah, it was a valve problem, and apparently 2 of the fuels that shouldn't mixed very rapidly. So that's why you got the rapid and unexpected disassembly, or whatever you want to call it. Do they stream the parachute test? No, they don't stream the parachute test. But if you look on NASA's website and also SpaceX website, I think they've got videos of a lot of the parachute tests, but they don't seem to live stream them. I've been looking out, Christopher, but I've not seen any. Yeah. SpaceX is cold. Yeah, it can be. Yeah, absolutely. In the cold parts it's cold, and the hot parts it's hot. Look at Elon's tweets. Yeah, I mean, I would try and catch up with Elon's tweets as much as possible. I don't always see them. I don't go on his Twitter as much as I used to, so yeah. All right, Christopher, you're off to bed. Thank you very much for joining. Appreciate it, and thanks for your comments, and thanks for putting me right about when Elon said we'll be producing one Raptor a day, so appreciate it. Thank you very much. And I think that's probably a good time to draw it to a close, because where I am, it is now 4:10 in the morning. It's kind of a bit past my bedtime, and I want to have a quick drop in at Logical Troglodyte's stream, see how he's getting on there, and I've really enjoyed this, and I apologise to everybody at the start for the sound problems. I really don't understand what was going on. I have OBS set up in such a way that I've used it for stream after stream after stream without any problems, and essentially I had to create another audio source in order for it to push it through and work. Why I had to do that, I still don't know. Probably me, I'm sure. It's always human error, isn't it, usually, on these things? So, these things happen. It's okay. I'll live and learn. But again, apologies for the sound problems as well. Where's the Edge? Thank you. Where's the Edge? Thanks very much for coming. Good night, sir. Thank you for joining me. And, well, I hope you have enjoyed that, and I hope you've found it informative and interesting. I'm really quite excited. I cannot wait for the first test to see this thing fly. It's going to be absolutely awesome. If I am around, unless I haven't got anything more important to do, I sincerely hope I don't, I will be streaming that. But bear in mind, the test launches tend to be very, very fluid. They're not always at a specific time like a launch. Yeah, it could happen any day. I could get very short notice of when these test launches happen, very much like the Start Hopper. Yeah, so bear that in mind. But I will do my best to stream it when it comes up. And yeah, so I think I will draw it to a close. Thank you very much for coming. If you haven't done so already, then please hit the subscribe button and hit the bell icon as well. And you'll be notified when I upload more videos or when I start a new live stream. So that only leaves me to say thank you very much for coming. I've been your host, the Casual Spaceman, signing out.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.